Welcome back to the podcast. We're back. Super excited to share with you the conversation I had with my friend Paula Toker. It was a great conversation about how sometimes life's journeys unfold in ways we didn't imagine and don't always match the stories we have or had in our heads. But in those moments when we don't always know what's next, if we're open to following our curiosity a bit and considering the words, what if, the path may just end up leading us to discovering our true selves. So before we jump in, let me tell you a little bit about Paula. Paula Toker, my friend, lives and works in San Jose, California with her twin sons. She's a visual thinker, dreams in color, and thrives when brainstorming a simplified way to explain a complex issue. With more than 27 years of experience in Silicon Valley at both Cisco and Apple, she has honed her skills into her one true passion as a right-brain thinker, thought leadership, and creative lead for networking at Cisco. Here we go. Hi, everyone. We are back with There's More to Our Story, and I have a great new guest here today. An old friend, old meaning we've known each other a long time, not necessarily old. Although I don't do the math when I think of my age at the moment, but it's hilarious. Anyway, Paula Toker is my guest today. Paula, welcome.
Thank you. We don't do math when we talk about our age.
No, but I'm starting to embrace it a little bit more. I don't,
Mm.
it is what it is. It is what it is. And,
Yeah, I'm not there. I'm not there yet.
well, it's a journey for all of us, right? That's where I think one of the reasons I kind of wanted to do the podcast was sort of this navigating this world, because we all have these weird issues we struggle with. And I'm curious as to why we suddenly struggle with it and why it becomes this thing. So I'm trying to embrace it a little bit more. So
Well, I
Paula,
think that's the fun of hormones too. The joy of hormones.
yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about your story, Paula. Give
Oh,
us a little background on
oh
Paula.
goodness. Um, all right. So Paula was born and raised in Texas. So I grew up just outside of Dallas in a town called Plano, Texas. That is not a town anymore. It's like a giant city. It's just it's huge now. So I left Texas and came to Los Angeles. I was in a relationship at that time, and he and I came out to California, and then I did a little bit of school, but just really just tried to find who I was and tried to find the career that I would fall into. And I have literally I have literally fallen into every career that I've managed to hold down.
That's pretty
So
cool, though.
I didn't have one direction. I didn't just like say this is what I'm going to do and that was my path. I tried a whole bunch of different things.
You followed your curiosity.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes that's the
Exactly.
best way to do it, and not everybody knows what the thing is going to be. Some people discover it young, some people discover it later in life. And I think if you can follow your curiosity a little bit, I think that Elizabeth Gilbert talks about that. Follow your curiosity. You might just find the path, or it'll find you.
Yeah, I was definitely a later in life kind of discovery. And part of it was I don't know. We can get into this later or whatever, but I never saw myself as a creative person. And then when I allowed myself to be that, then I was. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially in Los Angeles, everybody's there to be an actor, an actress, a singer, something like that. And I wasn't that. And that's what thought creativity was.
Hmm.
Yeah. Until I found it for myself.
Well, okay. So you were in LA for how many years? How many years were you here? Then you moved to Northern California, or
Yeah, I was in Los Angeles for 6 years.
Mhm.
and then I moved up to the San Jose Bay Area. Let's repeat that: the San Francisco Bay Area, but I live in San Jose.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's where you are now?
Yes, I'm in San
Yeah.
Jose. Hmm.
Okay, so if you want to elaborate a little bit, so you moved up there and sort of how did that sort of navigate and where did you sort of find your way into the next chapter?
So being up here in San Jose, it's Silicon Valley. And so I was looking for a job and started out as a contractor because a lot of these tech firms take on contract employees. And so I started with Apple.
Hmm.
And I kind of fell into that situation. And within just a couple of months, they hired me. Um, so I went into education for Apple for a very short amount of time, and then that was right when the old CEO Gil Amelio was leaving and Steve Jobs came back. So now I'm dating myself. That was 1994. Steve Jobs came back, and I moved into marketing communications, which is where all the creativity and
Hmm.
stuff. So the advertising, the box art, the the different forms of creative comes out to
Hmm.
discuss and to tell people about the Apple products and things like
Hmm.
that. So that's when when I got there, that's when everything changed for me.
Mm.
Mhm.
That's where you discovered you did have this little creative side, which I recognize because I knew you. I knew that side, but again, you just didn't identify yourself that way. But you
No.
did have absolutely had a creative. You were a storyteller.
That's it's funny that you say that because that's one of the big things that I do,
Mhm.
with the job that I'm in is the storytelling and stuff like that, but it's funny that you recognized it way before I did.
Mhm. Well, yeah, I mean, for a couple of different ways. I mean, first of all, you love to tell a story. You enjoy. You have a great sense of humor. You love to, recount information. So you're sort of just in conversation as your way that you connect with people. You're a storyteller.
Mhm.
I've known you since we were youngins. And I also remember when you wrote a book or you took you you actually started to write a book. You made a draft of a book. Do you remember that?
Oh, yes, I do, and, I still it's hilarious that you say that because I thought for sure that I was gonna be an author. I thought,
Mhm.
"That's where I'm gonna go," and I don't know, I wrote 2 manuscripts,
Mhm.
and they're sitting in my closet.
Mhm.
They went I did send both of them out, and they were both rejected, and that's fine. I kept my rejection letters and things like that, but I just wasn't in a place yet
Right.
where I was confident that this is what I wanted to do, and or, that it even would find me. So, um, I am one of those people, when I have these I dream very vividly.
Mhm.
So in the morning, sometimes I wake up and they're so vivid, I write them down. And I go back later and I think, would this be a story?
Yeah,
Um, so I still do that kind of thing. And I take my notes and, I've started 2 or 3 other manuscripts, in quotes. Um, and then I just eventually come back to them.
that's pretty cool. So how long were you at Apple? So tell us a little bit, keep moving. I keep
Yeah,
just
so I was
keep
at
keep
Apple
taking you away from your story, sorry. But
no,
I find it
no, it's
fascinating.
fine. Well, that's how you and I've always done this. We snowball into different conversations before we come back someplace else. So
Mhm.
that's just what we've done. So I was at Apple from 94 to 2005. And in that 11 years, I moved around through marketing communications, but it was with the push of a senior VP at Apple that I remember him saying to me because I was more in an assistant
Mhm.
kind of situation, but I would take on little projects here and there. But one day he asked me, he's like, "Why are you working for this other person? Why aren't you, becoming an individual contributor and getting out and stretching your wings and doing things?" And I told him, I said, "I've tried, but she just won't give me that freedom." So one day he just walked in and he said, "That's it. This is what she's going to do. She's moving on." And so I moved on and I started doing more work and things like that. But I really fell into my groove at Apple when I was doing um, merchandising, which was the merchandising for, at that time, it was our brick and mortar stores that were, I can't even think of the word right now. But they were the stores at that time. This was before the Apple stores opened.
Mhm.
So this was CompUSA and
Oh, yeah, okay.
Fry's and, Best Buy and things like that. So I started working um, with the design of those stores. So we started doing what we called an Apple store in store.
Uh-huh.
So it was the Apple feeling, but like in the corner of CompUSA or something. So
Right.
you would come into CompUSA and you'd see all of the, different products and everything like that. But in one corner, in one section of the store, it was very clear that it was Apple, from the design, the white background, the clean lines and things like that. And so I was doing the merchandising for those big box stores. And then that's when the Apple store took off.
Wow.
And the first one was in Palo Alto, which is where
Mhm.
Steve lived. And so from there, I started doing more of the retail stuff. So I helped out with all of the retail stores. I was one of the key players in the Miracle Mile in Chicago, um, and a couple of the other stores. But then I did the first international opening at the Ginza in Japan,
Wow.
which was a completely different experience because Japan is so artistic on its
Mhm.
own.
Mhm.
So we wanted to be Apple in Japan, but still recognize that we were in Japan. So that was
Sure.
very interesting.
What
Yeah.
an amazing experience that must have been.
Yeah. That was very, very cool. And then right after that, there was another shakeup and a layoff and things like that. So I was laid off and then I fell into Cisco,
Mhm.
which is a B2B company. So I moved from consumer products to B2B products, business to business and doing, I had to learn what a switch and a router and access points and,
Mhm.
stuff that isn't necessarily sexy, but then how do we make it sexy?
Sure.
You know, how do we make it interesting? How do we, because inside every single person, whether you are an IT buyer or whatever, you're a consumer at heart. Everybody
Yes.
consumes, so
So you were still in marketing, still on
mhm.
the creative side, but a new product, and so you had to sort of learn an entire new interface on how to market that.
Exactly. So I came into Cisco doing, um, I was setting up a website, working with another individual to set up a website to be able to share all of the collateral that we created as a corporate company in San Jose to spread out to our regions, globally.
Mhm.
So I started out there and then I slowly moved into where I am now, which is in our networking division. So I work in networking where I was doing all of the creative and the messaging and things like that for wireless and mobility. And then I kind of just from there, everybody really liked the work that I was doing creatively. And so they're like, we need that for all of networking. And so we're going to make you the creative lead. And you're going to think about all of these creative ideas and things like that for all of networking. You're going to do all of our videos. You're going to do all of our, you know, um, creative and finding vendors with the thought of what you want to create through them and stuff like that. So that's where I am now. And
That's
I
pretty
I
incredible.
abs I adore my job. I love it. I come in every day thinking, "What can I do today?"
Oh my gosh, what an well, and oddly enough, you fell into it, but your natural gifts just sort of emerged. And oddly enough, it's all about storytelling
And oddly
in a
enough,
weird
it's
way.
about storytelling, yes.
You are a
Yeah.
natural storyteller, so so it seems to me in my from the way I would view what you do, you see the world as a storyteller in a weird
Um,
way. Your view,
yeah.
you see the story in what you're looking at,
Yes. Yeah.
if that
I
makes
you know,
sense.
in corporate America, it's really funny. I love doing these tests. They have like the Myers-Briggs and,
Mhm,
they have all of these tests that figure out who you are
mhm,
and what you do. And the latest one that I did, I am a stimulator and a pioneer. Um, with a bend to storytelling,
mhm,
So it did I found it, but it found me. I don't know. I mean, sometimes I'm my own worst critic. It's very hard for me sometimes to own who I
mhm.
am and what I'm doing and what I think I'm supposed to be doing.
Right.
And I don't know why that is.
Well, I have some theories about that, and you and I have had some conversations about it, and it is sort of aligned to what the reason I wanna do the podcast, because I think the stories that we ingest as women and as females, that we internalize some of those stories and they become other stories in our head, and I don't think we're, um comfortable, some of it, I mean, there's cultural things where tooting your own horn is, you should be humble and all that stuff, and I think that can be sort of gender neutral, but I think for women it becomes much more difficult because we are, at least especially when we were younger, we were very much socialized into being in sort of being nice and serving and,
Mhm.
being a service type of philosophy, and it is to be selfless. Self-care is not something that is encouraged. We're supposed to be caring for others, and I think sometimes that gets internalized. Even when I did the podcast, I said one of the things that I discovered when I launched this, and I did an episode about this, just a solo short one. Um, One of the things that I had the most difficult was telling people that the podcast was up. It was up for 4 weeks before I told people, because it was that, "Oh, well, who do I think I am, and what are people gonna think?" And
Exactly.
right? And it was
I
that weird internal voice that was like, "What are you doing here?" So I'm curious where all of that comes from, and I think if we could get more examples of people sort of finding, especially for women owning some of it, maybe we could
Mhm.
and see it's common. It's not just you, it's just that's me. I hear it from others, and I find it very interesting. And I think for me, it got more difficult as I got older in some
I
ways.
I think in some ways it got a little bit easier for me once I got older because I just got to a place where I'm like, I'm here,
Mhm.
deal with me. Somebody told me a long time ago, she said, fake it until you make it.
Mhm.
And I took that to heart because it's like, who am I to put myself down? Who am I to sit there and to say, why do you feel like you can't do this? At least try.
Yeah.
If you fail, at least you fail brilliantly.
Mhm. Yeah,
At least.
you took the risk. I mean, and I'm more willing to take the risk, but I do have that anxiety as I got older.
Oh, yeah.
I we were when we were younger, we were much more willing to take different risks, I'm trying to go back to this creative roots of mine
Mhm.
that you knew me when we started, because that was the actor in me, and again, storytelling. So, um that's why I'm trying to do this, but I find it really interesting that, at least in terms of the media images, the stories that are projected what for in the way older people, women especially, are represented, if they are represented at all in old media, are not necessarily encouraging to embrace aging, obviously. I mean, there's a whole anti-aging community,
Yeah.
industry, and for a long time, and it's slowly starting to change, they just stopped telling the stories. They just stopped telling them. They just
Mhm.
men aged throughout their careers, and women just sort of went off into the sunset somewhere, like they just sort of fell off the face of the earth suddenly. And I'm like, "But that's not what happens." At all,
Y
and more women become more
exactly.
complex. Look at what you're doing. You have way more complexity and responsibilities, and so I find it so interesting that that's when they stop telling the stories, and I'm like, "Really? Okay, that's odd."
And coming from my Southern background, we are raised to be very hospitable, very friendly, very, conscious of other people's comfort and not our own. And then I think we came, from a society where, me coming from Texas and you coming from Boston, it was in our backgrounds, our family backgrounds, it was more, um, at least from my mother was a housewife and a mother for a long time. And my dad was the breadwinner.
Mhm.
Dad was a commercial landscaper, and he brought home the money, and mom took care of the house and took care of the kids, and so that was indoctrinated.
Sure.
And then there was, but this was the 70s,
Sure.
and things were brewing and things were changing. And then my mother decided, when my little brother was about 2 or 3, that she wanted to get into the workforce. And so she started working. And so that was a dynamic that I'm sitting there like, okay, that's interesting.
Mhm.
Did she want to go to work because she wanted to, or did she have to? And it's like, I never understood, mom said I just wanted to get out of the house, but it was like, really? I mean, what did you aspire to be? What did you
Mhm.
aspire to do? And she goes, I've wanted to always be a mother.
Mhm.
And I'm like, but you helped raise your brothers and sisters. Wasn't there something for you that you wanted? And she goes, well, there wasn't really anything other than being a mother
Right, in that generation, sure,
in that generation.
that was the expectation. Yeah, with some rare choices and, I mean, um, and it's changing a lot now for sure, but so you beyond your career, there's your journey took some other unexpected turns later in life. Tell us a little bit about the other parts of your journey as you were also developing your career.
Oh goodness. Yeah. As I said that I've always managed to fall into my careers and things like that. But you gotta pay rent. You
Mhm.
gotta feed yourself. You gotta do all these things. So I moved up to San Jose, worked at Apple. Now I'm at Cisco. And then I met this man. We met in marketing school. Actually, we were doing some extra adult learning at the University of Santa Cruz, and we met there. And Ben and I started dating, and then we fell in love and we got married, and then we had these two amazing twin boys, Max and Leo. They are going to be turning 12 at the end of this month, which just I know it's these
Yikes.
we're moving into the phase of hormones where they really smell. And they really smell, and they've got hair popping out all over the place, and I tease them that they've got baby stashes,
Yeah,
their
that's a
voices
whole new
haven't s
world, but okay, so I don't know if you're open to sharing
Mhm,
your age and when you had them, but
mhm.
whether you wanna not everybody's comfortable with it, I'm let you do your comfort zone, but it is unique that you had them a little bit later in life than traditionally one would think.
Yes, I had them later in life. Ben and I got married when I was, uh, 42,
Mhm.
my God, I think I was 42. Yes. And then we started IVF, we started the whole
Mhm.
fertility thing because it wasn't working. And so we did 3 rounds of IUI and then 1 round of IVF. And I remember the morning we were going in for the IVF because the doctor called us at like 6:30 in the morning. And it was a Saturday morning. And he said, I have got these 2 beautiful embryos. They are amazing. He goes, so you need to decide before you get here whether we're going to put 1 back or 2 back. And he goes, and you need to think about the fact that, you know, sometimes these eggs split, once they've been put in. So, you have a 75% chance, if you put in both, you have a 75% chance of having 1 baby. If you put in both, you definitely have a 50% chance of having twins.
Wow.
And I'm like, let's just do it. Let's just put them both back. So we put them both back. And I'm telling you, they say that 15 days later is when they do the pregnancy test. But I can tell you, like within a week, I was like, oh my God, I feel terrible. I'm not feeling myself. I'm not feeling very well. And the doctor had said to me, do not take a pregnancy test because there's a lot of false positive. And he
Mm.
goes, and I don't want you to be heartbroken and everything. But he called me and he said, are you sitting down? And I said, yes. And he goes, okay. He goes, I suspect that you're having multiples
Wow.
because your hormones are off the charts. And I'm like, oh my God. So then it was, about a month later that we went in for the vaginal ultrasound and you saw these 2 little specks
Oh my gosh.
with 2 little heartbeats. And I cry thinking about it because I remember that day. And I remember calling my parents and I met my parents and my sister in Las Vegas.
Uh-huh.
And my mother, I'm very much like my parents were very outspoken people. So I'm a very outspoken person. And my mother took one look at me and she goes, Paula, honey, you look like shit. And I'm like, thanks, mom. And we went up to the room and we got comfortable in our rooms. And then we went into, Ben and I went into my parents' room to start the day in Vegas and everything. And I said, well, we have something to tell you. And mom goes, what? And I said, I'm pregnant. And my dad just started laughing. My dad started laughing. And my mother just sat there in shock because I was 43.
Mhm. Yeah.
And my sister just stood there, Sharon.
Yeah,
She just stood there with like this look on her face, and my dad was just laughing. He was
which is
like,
hilarious.
he's one of those good old boys from Texas that was like slapping his knee, kind of laughing.
Oh
And my
my
mother
gosh.
was like, her mouth hanging open. And then a month later, I called them and I said, are you sitting down? And they're like, yes. And I said, I'm having twins. Dad starts laughing. Mother's like, what? You know? And then it was a couple of months after that. I think I'm trying to remember when the ultrasound happens for the sex. Because being an older mother, you have to have, those other tests, for like
Sure.
Down syndrome and things like that. And I chose not to have the amnio because there was a huge risk of losing one or both
Okay.
with an amniocentesis. So I'm like, I'm not going to do that. So they do this nucleo testing or something where they do a deep ultrasound where they check the water on the back of the neck.
Mhm.
And if there's water there, then there's a high risk of Down syndrome. If there's nothing there, then they're fine. Um, so we did that and the technician said, "Do you want to know the sex?" And I said, "Yes." And this whole time I kind of felt like I was having girls.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I felt like I was having girls. So my instinct as far as that was like out the window because she's like, "Well, this one here," and they do when you have multiples, they do baby A, baby B,
Mhm.
so on my right side was baby A and on my left side was baby B. And so she goes, "Okay, baby A is a boy." And I'm like, "You're kidding." And she's like, "No." And Ben was standing there just like, "Oh my god," he had
Yeah.
tears in his eyes and stuff. And then she moves over to baby B and she goes, "Baby B is a boy." And I'm like, "You have got to be kidding me." And she goes, "No, why?" And I said, "Because I was for sure having girls." And she goes, "Well, nope, you're for sure having
Life
boys." And she
happens when
goes,
you're making other plans.
"Well," and she said, they're not hiding their packages either. So it's very clear that they're boys." And I was just like, "Oh my God." So then I called my parents and I said, "Are you sitting down?" And um, I'm starting to tear up. I'm sorry.
It's all
Um,
right.
I just remember my dad's reaction. I said, "Are you sitting down?" And they're like, "What?" And I said, "I'm having 2 boys." And my dad just could not stop laughing, but I could also hear him crying.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
my mother was like, "Oh my God." She goes, "This is so amazing." She goes, "You were so blessed." And I said, "Yes, and apparently they're very healthy." And
Which is a blessing. I mean, it was
oh,
and here you are. I mean,
and here
so
I am.
and you know what? It doesn't surprise me that you would have had because the other part, I knew you were I knew you would be a mom. I mean, that just seemed like to
Yeah.
be the right thing, even though that wasn't the only thing, but yeah, I mean, I think it was amazing when I got the information when you texted me, and I was just like, "Oh my god."
Well, I knew without a doubt, I sit here and say that I fall into my careers and things like that, but I knew without a doubt that wanted to be a mom and I
Yep.
was going to be a mom.
Uh-huh.
And come hell or high water, I got in under the wire, but I did it, and God gave me 2.
So, what's that experience for you like? Okay, because you as an older mother, what have you learned that you think is different being an older mother that maybe you would have approached things differently if you'd had
Mhm.
the kids at a younger age? Do you think you do things differently because of that, or and what's the experience with other parents? I mean, is are you the older, or are there other people who are also older? I'm just curious
Mhm.
because tell us a little bit about that.
Um, there's a little bit of an age difference between Ben and I. So I'm a little bit older than he is,
Hmm.
and a lot of our friends at that time, we were the first couple to get married of all the friends, and we were the first couple to have children.
Hmm.
So everybody was just like everything was about Max and Leo.
Hmm.
Um, I do know now. First of all, you need a lot of energy, especially for
Hmm.
twins. So I understand why it's better to be pregnant when you're young because, you have more energy and things like that. But I think being an older mother is actually better only because you're a little bit more established. You know who you are or
Hmm.
you're closer to finding out who you are than if you were a younger mother. Um I have more patience. Now, I'm not saying that they don't drive me crazy, but I
Yeah.
do have more patience. I do have more understanding. I do have much more empathy um, than if I were a younger person struggling to make ends meet and things like that. So, I do think that it's rough being a younger mother.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, you it
but
worked
it's
out
different
that
for
way for
everybody.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's different for everybody. Was
Mhm,
if I were a younger mother, I don't know how I would have been able to do it,
mhm,
honestly. Trying to figure out who I was and keeping a job and all that stuff, and then balancing children, I just
mhm.
don't see how I could have done it. And I'm speaking only for me. I know I was meant to be an older mother.
Yeah, it was sorta divinely put into your life when it was meant to. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And they came busting into this world, like they took over. So, I mean, one baby takes over your life, but two, it's like, when parents, are telling me, "Oh my God, I don't know how you did it with two. I can barely make it with one." And I'm like, well, first of all, I didn't know any better.
Mhm.
I had to deal with two. But when some parents, are crying to me like, "Oh, I'm so tired." And I'm like, "Oh, shut up. You have no idea.
Yeah,
You've
you
got
haven't.
one baby and two parents. You're not outnumbered."
Yeah. So, I mean, so do you are you at this point you are a single mom right now?
Yes.
In
Yeah.
the end,
Ben
that's
and
how
I
it sort
split up. Yeah, Ben and I split up in 2015,
Mhm.
divorced in 2017, but we are very good friends and we are very good co-parents.
Which is
And
wonderful.
I know that Ben's going to be in my life forever.
Sure.
I mean, because he's the father of my children. But I always thought that I would be a stay-at-home mom, but after 5 months, I realized I really needed to get back to work just to
Mhm.
have me,
That's
just to be
interesting that you learn that.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and
I
I
mean,
find that interesting because there was a thought process, possibly because you were modeled a stay-at-home
yes.
mom in your
Yes.
own, and but that once you were in that, that wasn't the choice you chose to make. That wasn't, I mean, even if maybe you didn't have the choice because maybe financially you had to make different choices, but you also discovered you liked the part of you that was your work part too. So you
Exactly.
found a way to balance that for yourself.
Oh, yeah, yeah, and my dream of dreams, when I was dreaming about getting married and, that story that's sold to you, I romanticized my relationships, all through my life, that how do I say, my dad was an excellent father, but
Mhm.
he may not have always been an excellent husband, but he was always very good to my mother, and they were good with each other. They were
Yeah.
always good with each other, and, there were stresses and things like that, but, you know,
Well, that's
they were
life.
just
Yeah.
that's life, and they were just always meant to be together,
Yeah.
and that was what they did, and so I saw how my parents' relationship was, and you take that and
Yeah.
you form it into what your life is going to be. And so I just always imagined that I was going to find somebody, get married, work for a little bit, but then have the house and have the car, and then be a stay-at-home mom when I had my baby and this beautiful nursery and stuff like that. And it just doesn't happen like that, not unless it just
Yeah.
doesn't happen like that. It didn't for
Well,
me.
what's interesting about that is I think, and I've had this conversation, I think, with you too, is I think some of that again goes back to not just how we were modeled. So sure, I had a very sort of traditional family. My parents were
Hmm.
together 56 years and all of
Hmm.
that. So yeah, we that was just the life that I had. But oftentimes we're also told that story, right? I mean, especially
Yeah.
when we grew up, the Cinderella story and that. And so I think we do sort of romanticize this is the way it's supposed to be. And and I started to realize I think I pursued some relationships from that fantasy before I was rather clear if that's the fantasy I wanted, whether
Hmm.
or not that was what I wanted or that's the thought I should want, you know?
It never even occurred to me to, like, go out and live my own life. Go out and be a single person, move from Texas and go to Los Angeles as a single person and just make it on my own. That was
Mhm.
never, I don't
It
know,
wasn't, yeah. But oddly enough, that was the journey that I did w that is how it sort of played out for you, which allowed you to find yourself in it
Mhm. Mhm.
in a weird way.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, after I had the kids and you know, um, keeping them alive for 5 months and then deciding to go back to work. I mean, the first day I went to work, yes, I cried and I was sad and everything, but then once I fell into it, it was like the other side of me came to life again,
Sure. So you
and it's
found the
like,
balance. Yeah. There's a
yes.
balance in navigating in that, it seems.
Yeah, and it's not easy to find. Some
No.
people don't find it. Some people, it takes a long time. I found it relatively quickly. I'm not gonna say that I wasn't jealous that, I had a nanny at my house taking care of my children.
Mhm.
I'm not gonna say that I wasn't jealous about that, but at the same time, it's like, I had work and I had finances I had to take care of, and there was no way that it was gonna be taken care of if I didn't go back to work.
Sure.
So then
Sure.
it was like, I felt a little resentful, but then once I got there and everything, it's like, what was I even thinking?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and
I
it's
am a working mother.
yeah, and that's the reality for a lot of people. That's a very that's more I mean, I don't know statistics. I can't speak to this, but it seems to be that that's more of a normal reality for most people now.
Mhm,
And I think that's kind of an interesting part of again the stories we get. It's for younger people maybe they don't come up with that sort of the same fantasy because they're seeing and there's been a lot of effort to try to influence changes in how young girls are portrayed in children's
mhm,
programming like Gina Davis has been because they're not they weren't even they're not even in the stories they're never the hero they're and we're trying to say well that's not what the I want my daughters to see a different options growing up than maybe we were shown because the life is more expansive than we realized and when you get
mhm.
out there so but it's so interesting now though as we're getting to be older people in our lives again it's like when I look at the media so when I say there's more to our story it part of it is the aging out of characters which
Mhm,
frustrates me but it's
mhm,
also the variety of stories because I think if we had more um it varied stories. Stories like you, I mean, I can't speak to I don't watch everything that's out there, but how often do you see characters that you think reflects your journey? Do you have any good examples that come to mind that seem to be like reflect where you see yourself?
um, there's a couple of movies, there's the movie with Meryl Streep and Alec Baldwin, It's Complicated.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, that one really spoke to me. She is one of those actresses that just keeps moving along.
Mhm.
She keeps doing her thing, and I don't feel like she's being pigeonholed or being told
Right.
she can't, do this because nobody's interested. So, but she's one of those rare actresses that is able to do that,
Yeah,
or allowed to do
it's
that.
not she's the one of the few, but thankfully she's there because it is
Yeah.
and because there's some success in those stories and they're starting to realize, "Oh, there's a market, there's an audience out here, maybe we could tell more," which is wonderful. So I think that's nice because you're recognizing those opportunities that were done well, you know?
Yes, I mean, she and she speaks to me because she's trying to start her life over after a long marriage, with kids, older kids, but with children and how do you start dating again? Ugh, the idea of dating again and getting back out there, it's like I just don't know if it's for me.
Yeah.
So, and then Under the Tuscan Sun,
Oh, yeah.
um where Diane Lane, it's not exactly like the book, but at the same time, it's her getting hit with change and going to Italy and like, I'm just gonna start over. And my favorite part of that movie is at the end where she's like, I want a family, I want a wedding, I want all, and she got all of those things. They just weren't necessarily for her. They were
They weren't in the
for
way she imagined it, but she actually got it.
But she got it, and when she saw it at the end, she's like, "I did get it. I
Mhm.
did get all the things I wanted." You
Right. It
know?
was just not how the fantasy was in my head, but they arrived.
Right, and
Yeah,
and that's the thing that I think is really difficult is the fantasies that we put into our own heads,
sure.
it's they're so difficult to get out, it's like they're not I
Well,
don't know. I
I
don't know
think
if it's
well, and I think
necessarily
that's where
healthy.
this is why I think there's a connection to the stories. I mean, we don't recognize how much we internalize the images
Mhm.
and the stories that we see. And if those stories and images are being dictated by very specific narrow parameters from the point of view of one or two demographics that have their point of view, and they're not always they're not accurate necessarily accurately depicting what everybody's experience is. So if you see that, there's that part of you that I think at least it becomes what we think is normal. And if God
Mhm.
forbid your life deviates from what you perceived as being normal, that's where you can get that lack of confidence. Did I do it right? Is what's wrong? Some of that internal thing you break up because you're for me, I think some of the choices that I made, I was I had some lovely men in my life, but I don't always think I pursued some relationships in healthy ways because I had the fantasy I was chasing
Yeah. You were
and
chasing the
didn't always
fantasy.
recognize if this was even the right person I should be with. I just kept thinking I need to be with somebody. The pressure to be with somebody as
Mhm.
opposed to is this the right person? And I and is that even the dream that I want? What do I want it to look like for me? And for in my younger years I wasn't asking those questions the way
Right.
I would ask of me now. What I would be looking
Exactly.
for would be different because of who I am now and what I am comfortable in being, you know what I mean? But when you're younger, there's a lot more pressure to do what's expected,
Well,
and that's
the
not
pressure.
everybody's path.
Yeah. I mean, definitely the pressure was there for me to find somebody because I wanted to be a mother. I wanted
Absolutely.
to have a father, for my children
Sure.
and things like that. So that was kind of the pressure that I put on myself because I mean, I don't know who I would be without my children. I mean,
Absolutely.
they they make me, but I also make them, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Um But then, after the divorce and everything, friends started asking me, "When are you gonna start dating again?" And, "Oh, I'm gonna set you up with a profile online and stuff." And I'm just like, "Oh god, no." I'm like, "No."
I'm
I
okay
just
right now. I'm good with where
yeah.
yeah.
I'm trying to figure out who I am on my own. I'm trying to
Sure.
figure out who I am as a single mother and all this stuff. And, you know, the boys are gonna be 12, so in 6 short years, they'll be graduating from high school and moving on with their lives into college and stuff like that, and, what does my life look like then?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't necessarily see myself sharing a space with another man, not to say that I feel like I don't feel like I'm gonna want to share my space with anybody.
Sure.
Just being on my own and, I have my sisters and my brother and other family and friends and things like that. And I see doing a lot of stuff with them that I haven't been doing, because I've had young children and,
Sure. Sure. I mean,
things like
there's the
that.
priorities are different and but
Yeah.
those are gonna shift again. They'll shift again.
And yeah,
The path is gonna well, what I imagine what will happen is that you'll continue to follow your curiosity.
I hope so.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, even the work you do is all about creative and you asking questions of curiosity. The writing down your dreams are
Hmm.
you kind of have this sort of creative little piece over here that you may pursue the writing again. Who know? I mean, you don't know how that's all gonna, and again, for me, relationships, I mean, yeah, a relationship could come into my life and I'd be open to it. It's not
Oh,
the
absolutely.
end all that I'm like, "Oh my god, my value is connected to that." And that is, I think, sometimes the narrative we get if, again, the sense of what's considered normal. And normal for is much more diverse than we often realize, but that's not the story. That's not the images that we were told for a long time.
Right. I mean, I have another friend that she just cracks me up, but she said, "Paula, you're not looking for Mr. Right. You're looking for Mr. Right Now. You know, who is the Mr. Right Now? And it's
Yeah,
like, it
well,
could be
that
that guy over there at Starbucks, and I'm like, yeah, maybe,
maybe you
but
don't know how it's gonna unfold because it does change. We change.
mhm,
We evolve, our philosophies expand, and I think like you said, I'm finding sort of that confidence again, finding that more willing to take the risks and reminding myself that I can learn. I mean, learning the website stuff and the technology, it's like, oh, I did figure that out, and having to promote, and we'll talk afterwards
mhm.
because you're creative and know marketing, because I haven't got a clue how to market it myself or any of this social media. It's a whole new world for me,
Oh,
but
I'm
my
known as the
brain is
promotion
allowed.
queen.
You Yeah, well, and so I think these are the things that I'm kind of excited about learning. This is a
Mhm,
whole new direction for me, kind of going back to my roots creatively, but this podcast world is very different. But again, it's like I don't know what's next, but I'm willing to think outside the box. I've always been a think outside the box person. I mean,
mhm.
I came to California to be an actor. I mean, there was no practical journey in any part of my life. I mean, I did corporate America for a while and I found value, but I'll tell you, when I was in that world, there were times when I had wonderful people in my life and I was in a creative department, same as
Mhm.
you. But there were times when I felt like I was an alien because I think a lot of people came from it was an industry that my way of approaching things creatively was like, that's not how we do things. And I'm like, you know what I mean? It was just like they were much more, they had a whole sort of
Stayed.
corporate approach to
Mhm.
everything. And I took acting classes where you try things and and they're like, now we got to have a plan and the thing and the metrics and the thing and
Oh,
everything
I
is
know.
the metrics. Good Lord. I mean, that's not how my brain functions. So there was wonderful moments in it and I had lovely people, but there were times where I was like, this is not me. And I ended
Yeah.
up unfortunately shifting and got out of some of the creative parts. So maybe if I stay create in the creative teams, I don't know, but I don't question any of the choices because I think it was there when it was meant to be. I'm
Mhm.
grateful for the opportunity that I had there, and I'm on to the next part of the journey. That's kind of how my
Mhm.
brain that I sort of fall into things sort of similarly like you did. Certain things just sort of,
Well,
I
you're still searching. You're
yeah.
still, I there was one job that I was up for, with a company, and I didn't get the job, and I was very upset. I was like, "Oh my god," I was just upset, and I had just put all my eggs in this basket, and then this job fell into my lap. I got this gig. And so, I just I don't know. I mean, you don't see it at the time. You always
Right.
see it backwards, or what is
Yeah,
that? When you look back, that's when you see it. And it's
sure.
like, "Oh my god, if it had gone this way, it would have, who knows what would have happened, but, it went this way," and, stuff like that. Um, if I had gotten that other job, I think I would have been miserable.
Mhm.
Um, so God does work in mysterious ways.
Yeah.
And, um, I don't know. I fell into this job and I just sat back about it and started thinking about it. And I'm like, I'm just going to relax. I'm going to take it one day at a time. You know me, I'm very full of stress. I'm a very anxious person. Um, but I just started asking myself one question, and it's like, what if?
What if?
So every time
That's a good question.
I start thinking about, how do we promote this product or how do we, do this thing? And I'm like, what if, thinking about it from a consumer standpoint, I'm like, what if we do something like this? Or what if, or wait, what if it does, and I have meetings like that where everything just snowballs. And then somebody comes in with something else and says, oh, but what if we do it this way? And it's like, oh, I like that, and we just build from there. And so that's like my favorite question
Oh my
is
God, it's a
what
fabulous
if?
question. Well,
Yeah.
it's a good question for life, because, if it's a scary question sometimes for life, because you're like, well, what if I do it? I think one of the challenges I had was like, well, what if I do this and what's the result going to be? I want the answer. And it's like, no, that's not how that works. The result is going to be the result. You're going to have to do it to find out. But, scary is like, well, what if I do this and it doesn't work? And it's like, so there's a sense of wanting guarantees. At least when I got older, I had more, a little more apprehension looking for the guarantees. What if
Oh
this? What if
yeah.
this? And but then, then I mean, I'm sorry if COVID didn't wake the world up to say, my one of the funniest things I saw on the internet was like in 2015 when everybody who answered where do you see yourself in 5 years got that one wrong. You know what I mean? We all got that one
Exactly.
wrong. So it's kind of like, we learn resilience. We learn we can do things differently. Things change on a dime. They are out of our control. So if you allow yourself a little bit more of what if to pursue what if and discover it as opposed to try to figure out the answer before you even start and talk yourself out of it before it even
Mhm.
begins, which is hello, we've all done that.
Mhm.
And again, as you get older, a friend of mine said one of the things that we learn more, it becomes a common thing as we get older, we learn to manage loss. And I think it does shift perspective. It has shifted some of my perspective,
Yeah.
because there are no guarantees on a lot of stuff. And so I'm more willing to lean back into my creative, um, take some more risks because if a global pandemic didn't tell us this can change on a dime, and yet
Mhm.
we learn to be resilient, we learn to keep moving, we learn to do things differently, and that was kind of I think for a lot of people a good pattern interrupt because we can sort of get into the routines and not recognize that we still have some of these gifts and skills that maybe we just hadn't been those muscles that we hadn't had to exercise for a while.
Exactly. And with the kids, this is something that you and I in our lifetime we haven't seen. I mean,
No.
there's you know the the bird flu was in 1918, and then there was polio, and then there was AIDS. But it didn't necessarily affect us in that way. um I had two uncles that passed away from AIDS, and it their life was just cut short, and it was tragic, and I hate it and all that stuff. But then when COVID came around, I'm like, okay guys, we're sheltering in place, and I said to them at the time, I said, I'm scared, I'm worried, we're going to do things differently. And I said, but I want you to pay attention to what is going on. I want you to be aware of what's happening because, you know, eh, you're going to see it again. I said, I
Or
may not see
something
another
again.
well, I said, I may not see a pandemic in my lifetime again, but you will.
Mhm.
I said, I have a feeling that you will. And I said, so, pay attention and just realize that, you know, eh, eh, I don't
Life
know.
can throw you some curveballs.
Yeah, I'm like, we're all trying to figure it out. The world is trying to figure it out. Corporate America did not fall apart
That's right.
when their people had to work from home,
That's right. We all
you
learn
know?
to we learn new ways of having to do a lot of things.
Yeah, I mean, what did fall apart was, the restaurant industry and the bars and, things like that that depended on people every day. And for those people, I feel very bad.
Mhm.
That was very rough. But I think what's interesting with corporate America is that they realized, we're not, corporate America is not gonna die just because our people are working from home.
Yeah, we learned all new ways of
You had to
approaching a lot of
shift.
things. You did, and you know what? And it teaches us that shifting opens up opportunities if you look at that way. You know, there's
Yeah.
opportunity in those moments of challenge. I think about this. I thought about this question earlier, and I'm gonna. I was wondering what else would I talk about? You know, because we've known each other a long time, and I remembered the romance novel, and I
Oh
wanted to ask
god.
you this question. It was a romance novel, and
Mhm.
you had a second manuscript. I don't know if it was a romance novel, but um, if you were to revisit that, or you were going to uh, either look at it or start it again, or revisit it, would you write it differently, knowing what you it if you were starting it today at who you are now, the age and everything, would you approach the characters different, the heroine different? What story you would tell than when you were in your I think, you were what, in your 20s, late
Yeah.
20s, early 30s? What would you do differently now if you were writing a quote, "romance novel" now?
My heroine, my heroines were strong
Yeah, they
women
were.
anyway.
Mhm,
They found themselves in a predicament,
mhm.
like all those bodice ripper,
Yeah,
this was when I was still romanticizing, life and stuff like that, and, seeing some of the authors that I followed at that time and stuff, and, I always liked the heroines that were very strong.
sure.
I always gravitated to very strong characters, but if I looked at them again, and I have thought about that,
It's interesting.
um, I have thought about going back and looking at those again. And in fact, when we were cleaning out closets and stuff like that, my boys found the 2 boxes. And they're like, "What is this?" And I'm like, "Oh, just," and they opened them and they're like, "What is this?" And I'm like, "Okay, well, I wrote 2 books," and they're like, "Oh," so they were like thoroughly impressed. And then when I told them what the genre was, they were just like, "Ew." Would my genre be romance today? No,
No.
absolutely
Isn't
not.
that interesting? What do you think
No,
you'd
my
lean
genre,
towards?
um, a little bit more science fiction-ish,
Sure.
but not,
I can
but
see that.
not like Isaac Asimov or anything like that. A little bit of horror, but not like a Stephen King, just interesting, thrillers kind of
Yeah,
thing.
I can totally see that. I could see a little sci-fi. I mean, we did enjoy our sci-fi. I mean,
Mhm.
you know, we had our geeky moments, you know?
Well, I mean, like, one of my favorite, I found her, back in the '90s when Diana Gabaldon did her first Outlander book.
Mhm.
I found her book at Barnes& and Noble or something like that, and this was in the '90s, and it was a romance, but set with time travel, and I'm like, "Oh, that's so cool," So, and I love history.
You like the period
Anything.
pieces. I could totally see you doing period pieces. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that kind of thing, but, the romance bodice ripper kind of thing is just not me anymore. I mean, it
Yeah.
was in my 20s, but not anymore because
Well, and that
it's
was the genre then too. You were
yes.
writing within sort of what the genre was. Um, I would, encourage you, if you were to consider revisiting writing, to I mean, would you write the character as a younger character, or from the point of view of you now as an older character?
Hmm. When I
I
don't
would
see it.
encourage you to write a
Yeah.
character from of the heroine being of the age we are, because you are still a heroine in your own life. You're still on your hero's journey. It didn't end when you hit 40. It's actually got more exciting as you got older.
Yeah, I see the one idea that I have going around in my brain right now is a woman in her mid-40s.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't see younger. I see my yeah, I see my heroines aging as I start thinking of the book because
Yeah.
I'm aging, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, you have a different perspective. You have, and also, I think that's one of the things that I like about the idea of the stories, because I think if we got, especially not just having more women in the writers' room, but older women in the writing room, because the stories don't end. We have new stories, they evolve, and
Mhm.
like you said, you have new chapters, and if you stop telling the stories at 40 or even 50, there's another act that they haven't even gotten into yet.
Oh,
And
for sure.
and I think also, some of the research that I've been reading a little bit about, the more positive images and the more positive um internal philosophies we have about aging, if we have more positive philosophies about aging and see it more, people are healthier. They live healthier lives because it's not this, they stay more active, stay more healthy, they live longer. So I think the more that we could get more examples of,
Mhm.
you know, you know, people in general, but women especially, being vital and staying healthy and active and all of those things that you think just go away. We don't all just go, the sewing circles. We don't, that's not the experience that most of the people I have. And you talked about saying, when your kids are grown, you could see yourself doing other things with family, possibly traveling. All of those things are still part of the journey.
But I
And
think that that's our generation, though. I think
yeah.
our generation sees that there's more to life and there's more to experience, and therefore I'm going to stay healthy and I'm going to do these things, where our parents were like, they felt like they were, once they hit middle age, then it was just all downhill.
Right, well, but,
And
but again, do you wonder if that's what they thought or that's what they were told? I always wonder that, because there weren't a lot, they didn't have those. There were people who continued into life and kept working and kept active, and not everybody did, and I was just like, I wonder if society kind of assumed that's what you're supposed to do, so that's what they went and
Mhm,
did. Or like, and I think, like you said, more of us are going, No, I've got stuff to do. I'm busy. I still want to." I mean, I
mhm.
have so many of my friends who are really active, found new careers after they retired from the first one because they were bored. They had to get out of the house, and
Yeah.
and they feel more value and they love it and they travel. So I do think we are, our generation, and maybe even the generation ahead, the boomers, I think, are staying much more active, and we're aging into some of that. So I think there's a large population of 50 and older that is kind of shifting a lot of those
Mhm.
narratives in real time, which I think is, in the end, is going to be healthier for all of us.
Well, I think for my parents, I think that they were told
Mhm.
what to expect, and I think they saw what they should expect, and therefore they thought it that way.
Sure. Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
if you look back at pictures of generations in the past, they just look so old.
I know.
I look back at pictures of my grandmother at my age, and she was already an old lady.
Yeah, I know.
And
Isn't it's really interesting. Everything was so
yeah,
different.
and I'm like, I'm not doing that, So, but I also know, I have a friend at work that said, eventually when we age out and we need to retire, and I'm like, why? Why do we need to retire? You know,
Right.
maybe, I mean, with what I do, I I just don't see it anytime soon, knock on wood, hopefully, I stay in it and doing my thing. And, I just age is a number,
It's just a
I
number.
mean,
Yeah, I think,
I
and
s-
that's, again, that's the narratives we're told. Whether you retire
Mhm,
from one career, I think there's a lot of people realizing now that I was just seeing a little bit. I didn't read the whole article, but something about now that there's more virtual work and stuff. A lot of people are
mhm.
actually, older people, going back into the workforce
Yeah.
because they're not going to the same career, but they're
Mhm.
doing other things because they're looking to want to do more things, and now there are options for them that weren't there.
Right.
in certain companies, you retired out because that's what you did. You did this and there's this mentality, well, you have to go so the younger people come in, and I understand that, but that's again, that is a narrative. Is that the
Yeah.
reality of what has to be, or that's just the way we've been told it's supposed to be?
Yeah. I sometimes say this and, I do it more for a laugh, but, I'm like, time marches on and it's marching right across my face. I mean, I do see the wrinkles. I do see, what aging is doing to me. But at the same time, it's like, fight back.
Yeah.
It's like, at my age, my grandmother had her hair in a bun. She was gray. She was weathered looking, wrinkles and stuff like that. And, I'm like, why?
Well,
You
and I
know,
think, look, I mean, I am, as you can see, I'm stopping coloring. I'm letting it come in. I've decided to embrace it.
and I'm not.
I know. Well, and again, that's the journey we're all in. I've decided to say, well, I'm going to see what this is. Now, I may make another choice in a year. I may not enjoy it, but
Mhm.
I'm kind of curious what it's going to be. And I've seen a lot of, I think COVID for a lot of women was the said, well, I'm going to get through my demarcation line, so I'm going to go for it now. Nobody will see me, so I'll go through the awkward
Yeah.
moment at home. And I think again, is it the gray hair or is it the pin curls and we all did their hair, because I've seen some amazing women who have gray hair now and they wear it long and much more fancy cuts and they don't look any different. But back
Oh,
in those
yeah.
days, we had the short pin curls and the same hairdo and like you said, the little old lady hairdo.
No, it was a
And
horrible style. It
oh
was
my
a
gosh,
horrible style.
it was not a good look.
It
No.
was not meant to be flattering, I don't think.
Yeah, it was just crazy. So I think some of it is our own perceptions and how we
Mhm,
embrace it and what you feel. If you feel comfortable in your own skin, that I don't think it matters.
mhm.
You have to honor what makes you feel comfortable in your own skin, not
Exactly.
what society tells you you should feel comfortable in your own skin.
Well, and also that's the other beauty of being an older mother. It's like the kids keep you younger.
Sure.
I
You're
mean, they
active.
keep
Yeah.
me where they're very active and I stay active because I have to stay active, we walk
Well,
every
and they
day
keep your
and
brain active because you're
yeah.
staying on top of technology and young people
Mhm.
ideas. And so I think that is actually a blessing too.
That part is what's fun, I mean,
Yeah.
it's running around with them and seeing things through their eyes and then reminiscing saying, "Well, when I was your age, this is what was happening." And they're like, "Oh, wow," and I'm like, "But you guys are doing this and you're gonna see this." And, I'm like, "Just think of all the things you're gonna see," and we talk about that stuff. And that's a true joy of having children at an older age is that they keep you young, and it's true.
That's
It
pretty
is
cool.
true.
That's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
that is true.
Well, I'm gonna say, why don't we wrap this one up? Because you and
Sounds good.
I could go on
I know.
as we have many times for about 3 hours. Um, but I would love to bring you back if that would be something you'd be open to doing. I
I would
think
love it.
first of all, you're a great, again, you're a storyteller by heart. There could be things, there's so many things we could be talking about. Maybe you could be a co-host for a guest in the future or just
Yeah.
current events from your perspective, because I think just having varied perspective. I am somebody who doesn't have children. I was never married. You've had your
Mhm,
journey and we see things differently and we see them the same in some ways too.
mhm,
So,
mhm.
um we and I just think it's kind of fascinating and I love putting the stories out there because again, there's variation out there and there's not one path that's right for all of us.
No.
There's not one path that's the normal path. The
How
path
boring would
is
that be?
yeah, well, but for a long time, we got limited stories,
Mm, no, I
we
hear
grew
you.
up chasing certain ideas of what a relationship was because that's what was modeled as
Mhm.
not well, I mean, some of it we saw it in our own families and that's what was modeled. I get that. But there was also a huge sense for especially when we grew up, of what women's roles would be or should be in society.
Mhm.
And we are very fortunate to be part of that, the first generation, or maybe coming out of the boomer generation, of saying we started rewriting those narratives.
Well,
And
and
so
that's
my
one
God
thing.
is to say we're going to continue to rewrite them as we get older. We're going to rewrite them when we're younger. We're going to keep rewriting them because it's going to help the younger people coming up, so they don't end up in the same, old habits and old narratives.
Right. Well, and that's one of the things that I keep telling my boys, I'm not necessarily I pay attention to how I'm modeling things, but I always try to make them think outside of the box, like, what if you could do this? What if you could do that? And I'm like, I'm very conscious of how they see me. I
That's
don't want
interesting.
them to see me as a sad divorced lady, you
Mm-mm.
know. I mean, for a long time, I know we need to wrap up, but for a long time I was very angry. I was
Mm.
very angry, very sad, and, I didn't wanna see Ben and all this stuff, and then one day I just woke up and I was like, "It's eating me away." I I don't like who I am, and I don't like how I feel. And so from that moment on, I'm like, I can't live like this." It's gonna change, and I'm gonna change it, you know?
Yeah.
And, when Ben showed up to pick up the kids, I'm like, "Hey, how's it going?" And I was, like, all friendly, and he was, like, looking around like, "Where's the knife? Where's the rock? Where's what am I
Well,
gonna get hit with?"
you
And I'm
did the
like,
work. You changed the story you were telling yourself in your own
"Yes,
head. That's it was the conversation I had with my friend Eleni said that. She said the stories we tell in our own head control us. And it's up
exactly."
to us to do the work to change those narratives,
Yeah,
right?
and that's
So
what I wanted to model for my boys. I wanted
yeah.
them to see that it's not, you don't have to make it this way. It can be the way you want it to be. So now he and I are friends. We're
Yeah.
we're moving along, and all that stuff. But I know we need to,
Oh,
it
it's
just
okay.
you just have to change your story. You just have to model the story that you want your kids to see, um, for what your life is going to be.
Right. Well, and the way we start to change the stories in our head, the society ingests a lot of information when we're younger, especially before we have even any understanding of whether that's what we want. We just take it all in, and we fall
Hmm.
into some old habits. And so in terms of the aging out of the stories of women, I think, and the anti-aging and the god forbid you do this, so like there's this sense of like it's okay for men but not for women, and it's like, but that's
Hmm.
not reality.
No.
If we are blessed to continue on in this journey of life, then we get to decide what we make it. And if and many people out there are doing all sorts of things. And the more we recognize that, it gives us all that internal it gives us all permission to rewrite the narratives in our head,
Exactly,
as
exactly.
opposed to chasing what we think we're supposed to do.
What we're supposed to do. Well,
Yeah.
I would love to come back. I would love to co-host. I would love to do anything you wanna do.
Well, there's a couple of new, I'm setting up some additional interviews with people, and I think it'd be kind of fun. I think you'd be a fun co-host, maybe with a new person coming in and learning more. And you would ask maybe some different questions than I would think because of your
Mhm.
perspective. So from a listener, I think that would be pretty engaging. And also you're just a good storyteller and you're funny. And we, 1 hour is not enough for us. And we've already probably gone an hour and 15. So we need more time with Paula Toker.
Let's do it. Let's do
Let's
it.
do it. All right. Well, thanks for being here.
Thank you very much.
There's More to Our Story podcast was created by me, Elisa Gallagher, your host, is produced by Brian Richards. Theme music is by Andy Littlewood. And until next time, please follow the podcast wherever you choose to listen.